if I'm Frost, I go 3 years. You'd like to go 5, but maybe 3 and then something. But look at Tom Herman. If Tom Herman didn't leave Houston and then next year his team's not good, his windows might have closed. So I think he's going to take advantage of that. So
Texas.
He's got to be Texas, right?
I think he's Texas.
Thanks for cleaning up our mess, Charlie. And now we're going to bring in.
Well, think about it too. He's got a new quarterback. He would have a new quarterback, Shane Buechele, who's outstanding. He'd be a sophomore. If you could talk Deontay Foreman into staying one more year, I mean, Foreman is probably going to be a Heisman finalist the way things are said and done. So, okay.
Going live? All right.
Sorry, I was doing the mannequin challenge. Hold on 1 second.
The mannequin challenge. I thought we were supposed to move in that thing.
I was gonna just not. Hey, how you doing? Brant Parsons here. Matt Murschel. Happy holiday weekend. It's a Tuesday edition of College Football Now because, by the time tomorrow afternoon comes, everybody's gonna be long gone.
Everyone's gonna be long gone, and if you're standing in line somewhere at a grocery store, purchasing your Thanksgiving food. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Real quick, today is Tuesday. College football rankings come out tonight.
Yeah.
So we're talking ahead of the rankings. One loss last week of significance. Louisville falls embarrassingly to Houston. What are you predicting we see tonight when the rankings come out?
Well, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of change. I think the top 4 teams will stay the way they are. I think the bigger question is who moves up to number 5? Is it just going to be everyone behind them moves up one spot? Is it going to be Washington? Is Wisconsin going to find a way in there? Is Penn State going to move up there? Or will someone else maybe out of the remaining teams jump into that spot? I don't think there's going to be that much movement. I think where people are going to be interested to see is where do teams like USC, where do Oklahoma, 2 teams that are probably the hottest teams in college football right now, where are they going to wind up? And where are teams like Western Michigan and Boise State, the group of 5 top teams, where are they going to fall in those rankings? Because we've got 1 week left to go, and it's just going to be interesting to see where some of that jockeying comes into position.
If this was the NCAA basketball tournament, Oklahoma and USC would be the teams nobody wants to play right now. But
I still think anyone wants to play.
No, anyone wants to play, but I don't think they're going to end up in this mix. It is a rivalry weekend. We are going to go through all of the games right now. We've got a lot of games to go through, but starting off the official inaugural War on I-4 football game. They've played 7 times before. This will be the 8th, but now officially USF-UCF is the War on I-4. There's a trophy that comes along with this and everything. Bulls head into this game, number 7 in the nation in scoring offense. UCF, number 26 in scoring defense. That has been their strength coming off the loss to Tulsa. They're pretty much set where they're going in the year. We do predict them to end up in Orlando in a bowl game. USF still playing for maybe a bigger pie of a bowl prize. But this game, I picked UCF. You picked UCF last week against Tulsa. Maybe they weren't quite ready for that yet. It's a young team. It's a growing team. Should have beat Houston. Should have beat Temple. Tulsa, though, they were better than them. And I'm taking USF in this one because this USF team, maybe they won't win the American because of their loss, but they may be right now the best team playing, at least in their side of the conference in their division. And they get UCF at home. I think USF wins this one. And they get that trophy.
Yes, they get that trophy. Which, by the way, if you look at the size of that thing, reminded me a lot of the actual I-4. Cumbersome and hard to move around.
Hey!
Listen, I think USF wins this game, but I think this is going to come down to a very close affair. I think that UCF, as a young team, as you mentioned, I think having trouble finishing some games, maybe having trouble finishing coming down the road a little bit. Guys are banged up. Guys are tired. I still think Mackenzie Milton is struggling a little bit with the offense. I think the offensive line hasn't given any helped them out as well. I think they aren't playing the style offense that Scott Frost would like to see this team play. This looks nothing like what maybe Oregon was doing a couple of years ago with Marcus Mariota. You don't want Mackenzie Milton dropping back, throwing the ball 40 or 50 times. You'd rather have him kind of mixing it up a little bit with that read option. They haven't been able to do that. They haven't had a I think, over 100 yards rushing the last 2 or 3 games. They really need to get that running game going. I think that's the way they have success. I don't think they're going to do it against USF. I think they'll score points. I just think in the end, with Quentin Flowers and Marlon Mack and everyone, I think that USF ekes out a win here. If this game was in Orlando, maybe I'd swing a little bit more to UCF, but I think USF gets the win.
And I think that offense you're talking about, if Scott Frost sticks around, we're looking 2-3 seasons down, the offense is going to look like he wants it to look. But right now, it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I think maybe next year we'll see the development. I know there's been some rumblings about making a switch at quarterback, and is Mackenzie Milton your guy? I don't buy that. I think Milton is the guy for the future. I just think right now the offensive line really isn't doing a very good job. I don't think that some of the players they've been banged up. I just don't think that the offense is in sync like they were early on. I mean, we remember there's a couple games where they rushed for over 200 yards in a game. They looked differently. They looked like they were able to, really kind of move the ball up and down the field. They've done that a little bit, but I think what we've seen lately is when you force yourself to become one-dimensional, I think that just, really eliminates what they can do. I think the defense will keep them in this game because it's been good the last couple weeks. I just don't think they eke it out at the end.
Florida Gators coming off their stunning win in Baton Rouge. The SEC East champs head up 75 and over I-10 to face Florida State in their annual meeting. Florida State looking to make it 4 straight wins over the Gators, which would match their longest streak in series history. Jimbo Fisher in the news for lots of things this week with head coaching jobs open. 5-1 against the Gators since he became head coach at Florida State. The Gators, they stunned me with their win against LSU. The defense stood up at the end, made the play. They are sitting. It's the SEC East champs. It's hard to say too much about them, even as the offense continues to struggle. I don't see this Gators offense how it handles Florida State's defense. I know there are holes in the defense, but I think Florida State's defense is too much for Florida State's offense. Or Florida's offense, they will really struggle to score in this game. I'm taking Florida State at home. Make it 4 straight wins. Jimbo Fisher 6-1 against the Gators when this game is done.
This would be a good parting win for Jimbo Fisher when he leaves.
A parting win.
Oh, sorry. I mean, he takes the LSU job. Listen, I was surprised, like you. I was surprised what happened with Florida at LSU. I think that, to me, was Jim McElwain's signature win so far at Florida. I think that was huge based on going on the road, based on everything that was associated with that game. To get that win, especially at goal line stand, I think that was his signature win. Unfortunately, I think you go into this game, Dalvin Cook the last 2 years in this series has been unstoppable. I think he was the reason really why they won last year. The defense held Florida, what was it, to 2 points last year? I think it was some crazy number. I think the defense will step up. I think Dalvin Cook is probably playing some of his best football we've seen all season long. He rushed for over 200 yards last week. I think it is the same sort of thing against Florida. I just don't see Florida's offense being able to come up with enough points. So I'm taking FSU. But again, I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's not going to be a blowout. I think this could be decided by a touchdown or less.
And he called it Jimbo Fisher's last game.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I know we can have
Well,
talk about it, but we'll see.
Funny.
I mean,
it's out there.
It's out there, and I think again, we'll see what happens.
There are a ton of games across the country that have piqued our interest heading in this weekend. Lots of good eats, if you will, to throw it in with tie it in with the holiday thing. Try to go through them quickly here. First game, we're going to talk about Notre Dame at USC. They play at 3:30 on Saturday. It's on ABC. Freshman Sam Darnold, the USC quarterback, just amazing stuff, setting freshman quarterback records all over the place for the Trojans, despite not playing the entire season. And after starting off 1-3, USC is on a 7-game win streak. We're both picking USC in this game. I want to know what is going on in South Bend. What is going on at Notre Dame? Is this the beginning of the end? Is there going to be a high-profile coaching job open there soon?
Yes, I think there could possibly be. I mean, listen, news came out earlier this morning that the NCAA had handed down their, the fractions, found Notre Dame to have some academic violations stemming from a former student athletic trainer who apparently did some homework or did some tests for some football players. They may have to forfeit wins from the 2012 season, mind you, the one that they went to the national championship, and 2013. Notre Dame is obviously, they're appealing this decision, see what happens. But this doesn't look good for Brian Kelly because, again, you're coming off a season where you've only got 4 wins. This could be the worst season that Notre Dame has had since 2007, back when Charlie Weiss was running the program. And you were already kind of questionable going in, even though the AD said, you will be back, you will be our coach when the season starts in 2017. I think these sort of things aren't going to help their case. And I think, to be honest with you, I don't know whether it'll be them pushing Brian Kelly out the door or if Brian Kelly may look around and say, there's going to be something else out there. Listen, I could almost guarantee that the Chicago Bears are going to fire John Fox as head coach. When that job was opened up before Fox took it, Kelly's name was thrown out there as a possible, him either going there or going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe Kelly decides to go to the NFL. Who knows? Maybe he comes back next year, but the pressure's going to be on him. If he does come back, he's definitely going to come back on the hot seat.
And I won't bring up the fact that you picked Notre Dame for your playoff. And as
I
long
almost
as
think
you
someone
don't,
else.
as long as you don't bring up the fact that I picked Stanford in my playoff. If you had a camera on us for 20 minutes before the show, we talked about the playoff implications. We did all the ifs and whats and nows, and I said to you, things always work out. It always worked out in the BCS. It always seems to work out. This next game goes a long way of determining maybe how crazy the playoff system gets in these last 2 weeks. Michigan State visits Penn State, 3:30 on Saturday on ESPN. Penn State, they lost to Pitt. They were routed by Michigan. They barely beat Temple in Minnesota, and now they're on a 7-game win streak. And if they win this game, they could be playing for the Big Ten championship, depending on what happens in the Ohio State-Michigan game. Michigan State has lost 3 Big Ten games by 4 points or less, all except for the Wisconsin game. They've been within 2 scores at the end of the game. They played Ohio State very tough last week at home, a 1-point game. I think Michigan State is going to head into Happy Valley, make it Sad Valley, and make this start to all work out. Michigan State will beat Penn State on Saturday, and that way the Ohio State-Michigan winner, no matter what, is going to the Big Ten championship game.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to see Penn State, you want to see Michigan State win this game, so you get maybe a possibility to take care of things. But I like Penn State in this game. I think Penn State's one of the stories that aren't really being talked about so much. So when you talk about the teams that are in the top 10 of the college football playoff, you're not talking about Penn State because, but they're right there, as you mentioned. 7 straight wins. I think that, James Franklin's done an amazing job. I think he should get Coach of the Year if they end up winning the Big Ten championship. I think they will beat Michigan State because it is at home for them. I think they get that win, and then they'll get to see what happens later on when it comes. This game I'm wrong. Sorry, Michigan, Ohio State will be first, so they'll know
so
kind of
they'll
going
know
into this game what the situation could be for them. If Michigan wins and beats Ohio State, it doesn't matter what Penn State does. But again, if Penn State can get the win, I think they can hopefully maybe get the Big Ten championship.
A far cry from where we were after September when James Franklin, when we were talking about what's he going to do? Is he even going to still be there? This job has been just this terrible job. They lose the Pitt. They get blown out by Michigan. But
I think the theme for this season, for anything we've learned, is the first month of the season, don't take that for the being gospel, because you look at teams like USC, you look at Oklahoma, you look at Penn State, you look at all these teams that we kind of wrote off after the first month thinking, well, man, look what they happened. And then now look what they've done. 7, 8, 9-game win streaks. And now all of a sudden we got these teams, we're talking about them being in the playoff.
Yep. And Oklahoma is one of those teams, but we're not talking about it on today's show. The most played rivalry in FBS is Minnesota and Wisconsin. I bet you didn't know that. 126th meeting will take place on Saturday at 3:30. With a win over Minnesota and a Nebraska loss, Wisconsin is the Big Ten West champs outright. With a win over Minnesota and a Nebraska win, they will be tied for the Big Ten West, but they will advance to the Big Ten title game out of that anyway. So this is big for Wisconsin. They get Minnesota at home. Minnesota, sneakingly good record. Don't know if they're good enough to compete with Wisconsin, who has been playing big teams. They've won some big games. They've lost some big games. But I have Wisconsin winning this game at home. And, in fact, I have Iowa beating Nebraska and Wisconsin being the Big Ten West champ all on its own. But does Minnesota have a chance at Wisconsin?
No, I don't think so. I think Wisconsin wins this game. I've been impressed by Wisconsin's defense throughout the season. I think they've really kind of bounced back. When Dave Aranda left there to take the job at LSU, I kind of thought, well, you're going to see a little drop-off from that Wisconsin defense. It hasn't happened. Justin Wilcox came in, who previously coached at USC, was really kind of been able to take what they had, and that that defense has been outstanding. And then you look at what Paul Chryst has done. Again, is there any other coach that we've had that you could think about that really no one talks about but has done an amazing job in the first couple seasons? It's got to be Paul Chryst, because look what he's done with Wisconsin. Able to pick up the pieces right after Brett Bielema left to go to Arkansas, and able to kind of turn that program, keep it moving on, keep it as a factor. Now we could have them back in the Big Ten championship after 2 or 3 years,
and possibly playing a team that already has beaten them to a revenge game,
and possibly maybe even get into the playoff depending on what happens.
LSU at Texas A&M, Turkey night, Thanksgiving night game, 7:30 on ESPN A&M. Remember way back when they were undefeated and we were talking about them?
Yeah.
They've lost 3 straight SEC games, a couple non-conference games sprinkled in there for wins. LSU has won 5 consecutive meetings between these two teams. LSU, last week we were wondering if Ed Orgeron could keep the job. I think that question was answered when they lost to Florida. Now they head to Texas A&M, 2 teams, 3 losses each, 4-3 in the SEC. Both of them not where they probably had hoped to be at this point. I rolled the dice. I flipped the coin. I took Texas A&M because they're the home team. It's so hard to figure out what you're going to get from either of these two teams. They're so Jekyll and Hyde-ish. I thought LSU probably coming in maybe a little bit deflated after that loss to Florida, and I'll take A&M, the 12th man at home, to win on Thanksgiving. But I don't have a lot of conviction in this pick.
Well, I'm going to go with LSU on this one. I think, yes, I agree with you. I think the chances of Ed Orgeron taking over full-time as LSU coach have really dwindled down. I think especially that's why we're seeing so much of a push to get Jimbo Fisher maybe possibly over to Baton Rouge. If not Jimbo, I think there's going to be some other names they'll find out there as well. I think LSU wins this game. I'm going to throw this out there. This game could be the final game for both of these two coaches. I think Kevin Sumlin, if he loses this game, that would be 4 straight SEC games. I think you look at the last 3 years, he starts out really hot the first 5 or 6 games, but then the month of November is disastrous for the Aggies. I think if they lose again to LSU, I think there could be a possibility, there could be a push maybe to get him out. If not, he's definitely going to be on the hot seat going into next season, and they're definitely going to want to see them finish strong. They haven't been able to do that. That's why I got LSU winning this game.
Auburn, Alabama, 3:30 on CBS Saturday. It's the Iron Bowl, the 81st meeting. Alabama has won 6 of the last 8. 4 of those 6 were years they went on to win the national title. Auburn doesn't have a chance in this one, right?
No,
I mean, we're talking about it because
we can go back and forth and pull out statistics and everything. I think Alabama wins this game. Listen, I'm pretty much if Alabama were to lose to Auburn, they could still win the SEC by beating Florida and still be in the college football playoff. That's how strong I think this team is. So I think it's going to be a case where maybe. But as we know, this is a rivalry game, so obviously there's going to be. We saw the kick 6 return a couple of years ago. I think Alabama's way too much for Auburn. I think they win convincingly.
We have 3 big games to go. We have a Facebook Live question from Christian. He asked, and we didn't even talk about Miami this week because we had so many games. We both were going to pick Miami to beat Duke, but his question is, what team and bowl could Miami be playing given that UM beats Duke this weekend? He's already assuming, just as we were, that Miami beats Duke. I do bowl projections. I have Miami going to the Pinstripe Bowl. I can't remember who I have them playing there, but they're in that second tier of bowls, the Pinstripe, the Belk, that kind of area. But for now, I say they're going to the Pinstripe.
I think it's a good bowl for them. I mean, I know it's not a Orlando or a Belk or anything, but I think it's still a good bowl for them because again, Mark Richt first year, 8-9 win. I mean that's a pretty good feat for them. I think that obviously things didn't go the well they would like to have seen. They had that stretch where they lost a couple of games in a row. Was it 2 or 3 games in a row? I think was it 4 in a row?
4 in a row.
4 in a row. That really hurt them a little bit. Obviously, they were there in the mix. I think next season, again, you're not probably going to have Brad Kaya back, so that's really kind of you're going to see things, probably change up a little bit there. But I think it's a great first year for Mark Richt. Again, Pinstripe Bowl. Hey, who doesn't want to play in New York in December?
The holidays in New York. I mean, with all due respect to our one of our bosses, who wants to go to El Paso 2 years in a row?
Oh.
Inside there. Thanks, Christian, for the question. If you have any other questions, we're on Facebook Live. You can ask them there. 3 big games still to go, and 2 of them in the Pac-12. Utah, Colorado, 7:30 game on Fox. Game lost a little bit of luster when Oregon scored a touchdown on the final play of the game to beat Utah this past weekend. Utah has won the last 4 games between these two teams. They're 4-1 against Colorado since they've been in the Pac-12. But this is not the same Colorado team of the last 4 years. Colorado coming off a big win against Washington State. If Colorado beats Utah, Colorado will be playing for the Pac-12 title game in the Pac-12 championship game. They're at the bottom of everybody's I mean, way down, like below a lot of Group of 5 teams. Their turnaround has been remarkable. The home field advantage is remarkable. Utah, they've played one ranked team. They lost to them. I don't think that they have what it takes to go into Colorado and win this. I say the Buffs, will be playing in the Pac-12 title game.
I'm going to say run, Ralphie, run, because I think Colorado wins this game. I like what Mike McIntyre does. We talked about James Franklin being Coach of the Year. I think Mike McIntyre, if Colorado wins, gets to the championship game, the Pac-12 championship game, I think that would be outstanding for him. I think he would get the job. Now listen, Utah beats Colorado. That opens the door for USC if they win against. That opens the door for USC to get in there. Doesn't matter if they beat Notre Dame or not.
Yeah, so it's Colorado or USC.
Yeah, so I think that opens the door for USC to get in there. That would be amazing if you think about it, to have USC, which everyone had written off, as we talked about earlier, to have them in there as well. But I think Colorado wins this game. I don't think it's going to matter.
If Utah wins this game, USC wins the Pac-12.
Yeah.
That is my prediction right there. They need a little bit of help. They need Utah to go in to Boulder and knock off Colorado. But if that happens,
Colorado wins this game.
But that happens, I don't see anybody touching USC right now. Washington State playing for the other spot in the Pac-12 title game, the Apple Cup. It's always the biggest game of the year. There's always so much on the line when these two teams meet. The Pac-12 just crazy this year, but Washington comes into this game. They still have their sights on a playoff game. Washington State comes in a little bit down after that loss to Colorado, but two dynamic offenses. They get this game at home against the Huskies. Another upset, I'm taking Washington State. You're going to have Washington State, Colorado playing in the Pac-12 title game.
Two teams that probably were picked towards the bottom of their
Washington State
divisions.
lost to Eastern Washington to start the season.
And again, we mentioned another team that started out really slow that everyone kind of wrote off in the first month, now finding their way possibly in the Pac-12 championship. I'm going to take Washington in this one. I think it's going to be a close one. I like what Washington's been able to do. Chris Peterson's done an amazing job. I would like to see that, what can they finish out? Can they finish strong? Jake Browning's done an amazing job. He probably was a Heisman candidate up until a couple of weeks ago, but again, guy who throws a really nice deep ball. I think Washington's going to be around for quite some time in the next couple of years based on what they've been able to do this year. I think they go to the Pac-12 championship, and it could make an interesting showdown with Washington and Colorado again.
Two teams having remarkable years up there in Washington. It's great to see.
Yeah.
Final game that we're talking about this week, the game. Michigan, Ohio State, the traditional noon kickoff on ABC. Urban Meyer, since he's been at Ohio State, he's 18-1 in the month of November, 4-0 all-time against Michigan. Ohio State 13-2 against that team up north since the 2001 game. One of those losses coming in the transition year with Luke Fickell running this show. Michigan was riding high up to that Iowa game, obviously tripped up by the Hawkeyes. They ended up beating Indiana by 20, but it wasn't a dominating performance. Ohio State, coming off their big win over Nebraska, struggles against Michigan State on the road, but they get Michigan at home. Jim Harbaugh, Urban Meyer, this has all the makings of classics and players and coaches and everything around it. I think Ohio State gets the edge in this one thanks to that home field and really throws a kink into the playoff, but Ohio State beats Michigan.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Ohio State wins this game. I mean, if Wilton Spate was still healthy, and I mean, again, there's talk that he could come back this week. I think Jim Harbaugh's done a great job of kind of hiding the fact how hurt he was. If he were to come back this week or been healthy, the whole time, I think maybe you might be able to throw it to Michigan. But I think because John O'Corn has struggled a little bit, I think because Michigan's offensive line has really struggled. You saw that in the Iowa game. We saw it last week a little bit with Indiana. The line just wasn't as confident as they've been before. I think this game really falls into the Ohio State's wheelhouse. I think they get the win. I think it's going to be close, like you mentioned. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. But again, and this opens the door for all sorts of craziness when it comes to the playoff. And again, I mean, Urban Meyer knows how to win. He knows what it takes to get the job done. This would be huge in a way of crushing loss for Jim Harbaugh because, again, after spending all the offseason going on and on about satellite camps and going on about everything you've talked about, if you lose to Ohio State, that's the only game really that matters to them, and you don't get into the Big Ten championship, and you don't probably maybe even get into the playoff.
Well, if Michigan loses to Ohio State, they could fall even out of the New Year's Six Bowls, just how
depending on how it happens.
Things work out. Our late colleague Jerry Green used to pick games for this weekend with turkey legs. That's like a 5 turkey leg game. I mean, that's the prime of the game. And there's so many great games that we didn't even get to, but a fantastic weekend of college football coming up. It was just someone making a prediction. Same guy, Christian, picked Ohio State to beat Michigan 27-16.
Okay, that's a good score. I mean, I think Ohio State. I would have felt better if Ohio State had really taken care of business with Michigan State. Again, by only winning by 1, you don't feel as confident. Their offense hasn't looked as nearly as clean as it looked the other day. But again, this is.
You see, but we have a resident Ohio State nut in the house, in our staff, Steve Hudick, and I talked to him, and he was like, he's always doomsday, worst case scenario. And I said, if I was Ohio State, I was more worried about Michigan State than Michigan, because Michigan State on the road, nothing to lose, everything to play for Ohio State was the week after. Mm-hmm. I'm not shocked Ohio State struggled against Michigan State. They got the job done. They got the W. It's their tradition. It's another rival that plays them tough. Everything gets thrown out, though, on Saturday because you're at home. You know what to expect this week. Nobody's going to be flat. So I thought Ohio State getting past Michigan State, same way Michigan getting past Indiana where they finally started to pull away, same kind of thing. Just tough games, tough opponents, but don't want to look ahead too much.
How much are you going to be rooting for Penn State?
Me, personally?
If you're an Ohio State fan.
If you're an Ohio State fan, you're not rooting for Penn State.
You want Michigan State to win that game.
Go green.
Listen,
Gang
we
green.
talked about this before the game, and we'll wrap it up real quick. But if Ohio State win, there's a possibility next week's playoff rankings could be one of the most controversial playoff rankings we've seen yet. And there'll be a lot of teams and a lot of fans who are going to be upset by when things are finally said.
We'll save the hypotheticals till they actually play.
All right.
We'll be back next week on Wednesday, our normal time. So get your bellies full, enjoy the football this weekend, and then we'll be ready for conference championship games.
Yes.
Unless you're the Big 12, and then you just play one more week of regular games. Because you're not cool like the other conferences. For Matt Murschel and Brant Parsons, thanks for watching us at OrlandoSentinel.com.
Happy Thanksgiving.